What up, perps? Kid Copious. Back in effect. Purple State Party. You know what we're doing here? We're repping America, the center, and common sense, and keeping love in your heart. Well, today is 260 episodes. Never missed a week. Made it 5 years. I just wanted to see where it was going to go. See what I could make of this. Hey, I'm glad I reached a few people, I love everybody who watches this. I love everybody who doesn't watch this. I made it, man. I set a goal for myself, and I made it. So I guess, this being my last Fetty Cannon, I got to give it up to my alter ego, Kid Copious, Fetty Cannons. Over the last 5 years of me doing this show, we witnessed the rise of the far left. And when we got to that last election, I think even the Democrats were tired of that kind of far left way of thinking. They saw that it was headed nowhere. And it wasn't so much that Democrats, the blue, lost, but it was that common sense won. I certainly don't feel like my job is done, but I think we're on better ground now. I think we're on more solid ground now. We're seeing the end of the left's nonsense. This bowing with such reverence to DEI, BLM, critical race theory, gender theories, all that crap. It doesn't work. And worse, those things only separate us. We are Americans. We need to remember that. And it's not that trans rights, gay rights aren't important. It's not that black lives don't matter. It's that we're all Americans. And when we look at things through that lens, we can make meaningful change. Together, we are stronger. Together, we have come so far. Racism, homophobia is no longer an accepted ideology. Hatred just simply based on differences is no longer the status quo. I look back across my 50-plus years, and I see changes everywhere. I remember the smog days. I remember the acceptable hatred. I remember the violence towards people. That was kind of shrugged off. A lot of victim blaming back then. If he wasn't gay, he wouldn't have gotten killed. Crazy shit like that. That's no longer tolerated. Is there still work to be done? Sure, but not quite as much as we're being sold by the far left. While hatred could never be stamped out, I've literally never seen the level of tolerance that we see today. We have gay pro athletes, for God's sakes. We don't have gay teachers and actors and people of all professions having to hide in a closet. Sure, there's still families out there that aren't accepting. Sure, there are still assholes out there. But that's always going to be there. The average person today has far more tolerance and love in their heart than they did in the past. I'm looking at this cartoon here. This is from Bronco. It's a pop quiz, and you've got your Free Palestine, your stop white oppression, LGBTQ plus, and white supremacy. And the questioner is asking, how does any of this improve academic outcomes? And he's addressing the Minnesota Board of Education. But I think this goes across all of our culture. We did. We spent 4 years bowing to these people with their radical ideas who were painting a picture that simply wasn't true. And meanwhile, our test scores going down. Our kids being raised to be dumb and obedient and slaves to a political party and slaves to an ideology. You can have sympathy for the people who live in Palestine, but at the same time, you also got to realize that Hamas is made up of the people of Palestine. Diversity, equity, inclusion simply means hiring bad people because they check boxes. What white oppression are we talking about? That kind of shit isn't tolerated. When it's raised, it's stamped out. White supremacy, when they start calling Larry Elder the black face of white supremacy, they've gone off the rails. This one really sums it up. This is the old Redskins logo here. When you're so woke that a Blackfeet chief drawn by a Blackfeet artist approved by the Blackfeet Nation is considered offensive to white people. White people. I'm one of them. You might be able to see that. See that? That's white, right? The problem is they're being sold this pack of lies that every white person is responsible for every dickhead move ever made by a white person. And you have people who are clinging to that. And the only way that they can get out from under that is to join one of these little groups or just go Karen every time they see something that might be considered racist. But what's racist is that they don't even consider the representation that that Indian chief brings to Native Americans. That's their logo right there. That reminds people of our past, what we did, what we have to atone for, right? We need to improve the quality of life for them. But then when Joe Biden decides, hey, we're going to try to figure out a way to get Indian reservations, far-flung parts of our society on high-speed internet, they put their dumbass DEI in there and nothing gets done. But they remove the logo. What good does that do? What good does that change? Native Americans were not offended by the term Redskins. They were certainly not offended by the logo. What's offensive about that logo, the Redskins logo? Nothing. But a bunch of far-left white people decided that it was. And that's the kind of craziness that I feel like we're moving away from nowadays. I have my beefs with Trump. I have my beefs with Elon. I have my beefs with both political parties. Look, purple is made up of red and blue. Okay? When you mix red and blue, you make purple, and red and blue disappear. But at the end of the day, I don't side with this far left ideology where white people are telling minorities what's offensive and what's not offensive. It's fucking stupid. You know, a lot of news right now focuses in on what could happen with Donald Trump's tariffs. This is a cartoon by Bronco, and Trump's loading up his tariff gun, and the Democratic donkey saying, I'm outraged, he's going to ruin America. 2 minutes later, both Mexico and Canada are surrendering. Trump says that outrage didn't age well, and the donkey says, whatever. And that's where our media is out right now. They begrudgingly have to give credit when credit's due. I get it. Trump's a maniac. Elon Musk is a maniac. I've said as much many times. But what the game they're playing right now is we are not going to live on our knees. We rather die on our feet than live on our knees. That's American. That's the American spirit. That has always been the American spirit since America was created way back in the late 1700s. We want to stand on our own 2 feet. Biden was the most wishy-washy, mealy-mouthed person ever. And the cause and effect of that is now we have Trump. And Trump has control of the House and the Senate. And he's going to do what it takes. And it's about damn time. You know, we need to stand up for ourselves. We are the biggest, best country out there. You could argue best. You can't argue biggest. I mean, you could argue biggest, but you put the two together, you can't argue that. Whew. I just included this one because Chris Farley's in it. You know, the old Saturday Night Live bit. And he says, remember when you put Tulsi on your terror watch list, Quiet Skies, and then she became your boss? That was awesome. And of course, he said that to the transportation, the TSA. We have some controversial people who are running things right now. But the one thing that I think we should all agree on is these are people who are willing to shake up the status quo. And the status quo needs to be shaken up. We'll get more into that later. Just a quick note here. The LA Mayor Bass removes the fire chief, blaming her for the lack of preparation. It's just the blame game. There were a lot of factors that went into the devastating fires that we had earlier in the year. You know, the Palisades fire, the Eaton fire. I don't think anybody in command did a good job. I really think that the only hope really for Los Angeles is just to clean them all out. The city council, the coastal commission, Bass, all of her cronies. We need to start over. I don't particularly blame Crowley for any of this. And I really don't like the fact that people say that they are DEI hires, although I did chuckle when I saw a post that said DEI fires DEI. We've come full circle. But it is kind of the point, Bass ran against Caruso. I liked Caruso. He was really supportive of Biden, so that kind of turned me off a little bit. But I thought he was the better candidate. But he didn't get elected because the ideology of the day when he was running was that, it all had to be diverse and equitable and inclusion and all of that. And we ended up with Bass, who is a do-nothing mayor. She's not doing anything. She's not taking responsibility. I haven't heard any plans about going forward, how we're going to correct some of the problems we saw in the Palisades fires, or what we're going to do with the rampant homelessness that we're suffering under. But whatever. The blame game goes on, Also in the last 5 years, we've seen the European leaders, some of the nicer countries in Europe there, just literally commit suicide. They don't listen to their people. They cower to climate change lunatics. They open their doors to people who hate Western society. Then they turn a blind eye to those issues that come up. We just survived 4 years of similar nonsense. But we've corrected course. Europe has not quite done that yet. And in fact, over in Europe, they're fighting really hard to keep their status quo. But what they forget is that people are like teapots. Once the steam builds up, it has to be released. It has to be released or it's just going to blow. And that's where Europe is right now. This comes from Fox News. Vance is right about free speech. That's what makes EU, and US leftists so mad. What he's talking about here, is some of the laws that they have in these countries that are imprisoning people for not exactly towing the party line. Some of it's hatred, and, whatever. Maybe they need to be banned from certain platforms and stuff. But I don't think people should be jailed for their opinions. And that's one of the things that they do in Europe is they just kind of reclassify things as hate speech or misinformation, And one of the things that we've noticed and we've seen over this time is that a lot of times misinformation turns into the truth. But here's some of the, the headlines from Vance's speech last week. Vance floats U.S. troop withdrawal from Germany over free speech, blah, 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 blah. But they are doing those things. Those things are happening. One of the things he was talking about was in France, there was a fatal shooting that fueled by a wave of videos of destruction shared on social media. The riots in France. And Macron over there said that, they need to put themselves in a position to regulate or cut them off, referring to the social media. 3 weeks later, France's European Commissioner at the time, after having been asked to comment about some of the 60 NGOs that were hostile to the idea, made the statement on the possibility of a temporary shutdown of the platform, though only in extreme cases. Okay. They want to cut off Twitter, in other words, or X, excuse me, Elon. I don't know why you named it X. That was a dumb name. It had a good name. It had a marketable name. I don't know why you did that, but you did it, whatever. The thing about it is that being able to express ideas is a way people let off steam. But it is also a tool that can be used to promote people opening their eyes to what the actual problem is. The media, if you watch CNN, you're going to get one side. If you watch Fox, you're going to get one side. But through social media, you see both sides. Okay? Yes, you have to take a lot of bad with that, But when they're talking about imprisoning people for putting down politicians, Vance also referred to a Christian Iraqi man, Salwan Mika, who was shot dead in his apartment in the suburbs of Stockholm. He had arrived in Sweden in 2018 and burned several Qurans. These acts led to angry protests in several Muslim countries, right? He also mentioned another Iraqi refugee, Salwan Najem, who also participated in these Quran burnings and was condemned for inciting hatred against an ethnic group. These people were arrested and charged with things, and then one of them was just murdered by a Muslim. The exact same thing that these people were speaking out about. Look at the terror groups around the world. They do have one thing in common. But Vance was criticizing the freedom of speech in Sweden, which he believes to be backsliding. And he has said for the rest of Europe, just like Trump, Vance holds free speech in high esteem and considers it to be one of the U.S.'s foundational principles. According to his view of the concept, no speech may be prohibited by law, not even hate speech. I sort of agree. I guess in some ways I would draw the line at, is the hate speech being directed at an individual or a group? In which case, obviously saying it to an individual, I would say is a little more of a crime than speaking as a group. I myself don't subscribe to hate speech. I have groups that I don't like, but I don't think I've ever talked about them in any way that would be considered hateful. But, he was talking about free speech. And then that led... This is funny. This is from Babylon Bee. Legion of Doom condemns J.D. Vance speech. Look at Lex up there. But then over here, our media, CBS, who obviously didn't get the memo that we're done with this far left, extremist bias, all of this shit, continued on. And this is from Reason.com. CBS is wrong about free speech in Germany and the rise of Nazism. So this was on Face the Nation over the weekend. Margaret Brenner casually asserting that free speech is what empowered the Nazis to take over the government and implement the Holocaust. Right. And they concluded with present-day German authorities in which they detailed their efforts to suppress not just Nazi speech, but also misinformation, gossip, and insult towards politicians. Yeah, gossip and insults towards politicians. Look, obviously nobody wants misinformation on there, but isn't that more... okay, let me slow down. Right now, on places like TikTok and, Facebook, whatever, Instagram, YouTube, there are people out there who are posting cooking videos that are extremely dangerous. They're posting survival videos. They're posting just various videos of dangerous, reckless behavior. But the government and the platforms only seem to want to focus in on people who are talking bad about Democrats. I don't really see that anybody could argue with that point. It's just fact. But anyhow, let's continue with this. It was an alarming degree of contempt for cherished free speech principles, to say the least. News organizations are free to advise a preference for Europe's pro-censorship policies, but the criticism they attract from the right, such as Vance and Rubio, is quite deserved. Yeah, you can have your opinion, but people can disagree. Brennan's claim that free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide in Nazi Germany is profound misreading of history. Right? She made these remarks when she was talking to Rubio. The idea that Germany during the period between World War I and World War II was some free speech paradise and that the Nazis used it to their advantage is utterly false. In fact, historians of the interwar period have a name for this false claim, the Weimar fallacy. Far from permitting Nazis to practice free speech, the German government shut down hundreds of Nazi newspapers in a 2-year period. They shut down 99 in Prussia alone. They accelerated that crackdown on speech as the Nazis ascended into power. And then Hitler himself was even banned from speaking in several German states from 1925 until 1927. In any case, Brennan's argument that free speech empowered the Nazis, it's obvious that she was incorrect because there were significant restrictions on their ability to speak freely. The German government tried desperately to censor Nazis. It didn't work. And then, of course, when the Nazis achieved political power, they were able to use the government's vast censorship apparatus to silence their critics. See? Nobody over there was practicing free speech. To this day, Germany still prohibits certain kinds of Nazi speech. Right? A different CBS show, the Sunday evening news program 60 Minutes, spotlighted the German authorities' current efforts to police such speech. What they revealed was fairly alarming. Indeed, the German government censors not just Nazi speech, but also hate speech And much more broadly, misinformation, gossip, and even insults towards politicians. Yeah, that's what's going on over there. That's why Vance was speaking out about it. Because the problem is, yes, Nazi speech, misinformation, gossip, and even insults. All right? I can see how that could be bad. But at the same time, I can also see how you can keep redefining things to fall into those categories. I mean, think about it. We had the Hunter Biden laptop over here. People were censored from talking about it, and then guess what? It turned out to be true. There's origins of things that people talk about that, again, are turning out to be true. We had an election in which there was a lot of confusion and a lot of red flags, I guess you can say. And even myself had videos taken down over that. I wasn't trying to provide misinformation or gossip or insult politicians. I was raising a problem. And the worst part about it for me personally was that I raised those issues before the election. But whatever. So I want to preface this by saying I am not trying to justify Ed Trump. Okay? That's not what I'm doing here. All right? Trump made campaign promises. He needs to follow through on them. But let's talk about eggs, okay? This comes from the Daily Mail. And this kind of shows you how, the left-wing media and the right-wing media sort of operate for the most part. Like, for example, when we were talking about the Pacific Palisades fire earlier, one thing that the left-wing newspapers were always focused on was the cost and the possible involvement of climate change, right? Whereas the right was talking about the difficulties going forward. It was the same thing with eggs. You hear the story of, it's the bird flu, it's Trump, he's not doing enough. But anyhow, let's look at the obvious reason egg prices are soaring, and it's not the avian flu. Egg prices have cracked record levels, costing as much as $10 a dozen. A key reason for the price spike is the ongoing avian flu outbreak. But Americans' increasing appetite for eating out for breakfast is also a major part of the scramble, you get it, the scramble, that is causing shortages and high prices. In fact, breakfast is booming at U.S. eateries. First Watch, a restaurant chain that serves breakfast, brunch, and lunch, nearly quadrupled its locations over the past decade to 570 locations. Eggs Up Grill has 90 restaurants in 9 southern states, up from 26 in 2018. Florida-based Another Broken Egg Cafe celebrated its 100th restaurant last year. Fast food chains are also cooking up more breakfast options. Starbucks, which launched Egg Bites in 2017, now has a breakfast menu with 12 separate items containing eggs. Wendy's reintroduced breakfast in 2020 and offers 10 items with eggs. The trend is undeniable. Review website Yelp said 6,400 breakfast and brunch businesses opened in the U.S. last year, 23% more than 2019. So if you think about it, you have all these people who are already a slave to coffee, and that's a whole nother thing. But I've noticed that. How you ever notice in TV now, you don't see people making coffee at offices. You see people bringing in coffee. So everybody goes to Dunkin' or Starbucks or Winchell's or wherever, McDonald's, for their coffee in the morning. Now they realize, well, I might as well add in an Egg McMuffin. So our consumption of eggs has gone on. But the ongoing outbreak, bird flu, which so far has forced farms to slaughter nearly 159 million chickens, turkeys, and other birds, including 47 million since the start of December, is making supplies scarcer and pushing up prices. The truth of the matter is, if the bird flu wasn't there, we might be able to keep up with demand, but our demand is growing. It's not to say that the bird flu isn't a part of it, but this is the full story. Whereas the LA Times runs the article, California is at the center of the country's egg mess. Here's why and what's coming. And all they want to talk about is the outbreak of the bird flu. Right? Why is egg prices so high? The primary factor behind the jump in egg prices is the avian flu epidemic. Okay, that's true. That's part of it. But the demand is the full part. And that's, this is what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to show the fact that there are multiple sides, multiple angles to these stories, and we need to look at the full picture. Simply blaming a person or an illness is not very effective. And I noticed that that's the left loves that. I mean, come on. When we had that pandemic, who was in love with the shutdowns and the masks and participating in running up the totals and all of that? But of course, the LA Times, wants to throw in this thing at the end here. If President Trump successfully implements his steep tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China, produce prices could soar. Trump campaigned on the promise that he would lower grocery prices after frequently blaming President Biden for inflation and high everyday costs. So right there, they're politicizing it again. Was Biden responsible for all this? No. But did he do anything to try to stem it? No. He tried to switch everybody to green energy, which drove up fuel costs, which drive up the cost of everything. And quite frankly, the tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China are being done for the greater good. And they don't talk about that. They don't talk about that. Inflation has hit this country and the world very hard, and there is no easy solution. But we're not going to find solutions to anything, really, if we're only looking at it from one side. We were just talking about looking at things from multiple sides. And that's one of the things I do like about this whole Doge thing. Now, this is one of the headlines. Doge claims it found $4.7 trillion in treasury payments that are untraceable. Now, there's a lot to this story. It's kind of boring. But, they are, requirements are in place now that they have to put down what the hell the money was for. But can you imagine that our government was sort of operating with here's a check and they don't even write down what it was for? Imagine trying to balance your checkbook by just putting down the numbers. Well, okay, maybe you could keep on top of your finances that way, but you don't know where your expenditures are. And that's what I'm seeing in Doge, is that they're trying to shine a light on some of these idiotic accounting practices that we do. Bronco has a great cartoon here where the IRS is running at a taxpayer. And then all of a sudden, Doge turns around. There's Elon Musk turning the magnifying glass on the IRS. And he's got a briefcase that says audit in his hand. Yeah. That's what we need in this country. We've reached a point where this is no longer just an option. This is a necessity. We need to get in there and figure out where the fuck all the money's going. But as usual, the media only presents one side. They're talking about how Elon Musk is going to gut the IRS, but they're not bringing up the context. The IRS, over the last couple of years, has added about 30,000 employees. Doge wants to let 6,800 go. The media cries foul. They say, oh, no, you can't change the government. And that's one of the things that we operate on right now. That any government agency is vital and must be sustained. And that's simply not true. Our government must be redefined every so often to reflect the current needs. We have little groups all around the government that are being fed taxpayer dollars, many of them doing the exact same thing as another one over there. But nobody cares as long as the money keeps flowing. Well, the problem is as the money dries up, what are they going to do? They're going to raise taxes. Reducing our government can save us taxes. We might not lower our taxes right now, but at least it won't add to raising our taxes down the line. We have to promote efficiency. And once we start promoting efficiency, that ushers in common sense. We need transparency in our federal government. We need to see where our money is going. And while we're on the subject of transparency, stop with all this bullshit about Elon Musk not being an elected official. Most of the people in the executive branch of the government, other than the president and sort of the vice president, most of those people are unelected. Buttigieg, Mayorkas, those people were unelected. Where was talk about them being unelected? There are all kinds of little independent groups out there that the government forms. They are unelected. But at the end of the day, Congress has the power to act, to rein in some of these things. But Congress is dysfunctional. One reason Congress is dysfunctional is that extremists kowtow to their little group and get elected, and then they don't want to rock the boat. Or if they're going to rock the boat, it's only for their extremist policies. And that goes for both sides of the fence. So Elon's not running around unchecked. He's left unchecked. Yeah, there have been a few lawsuits and things here and there that are going on. But at the end of the day, our government's not necessarily doing the job that we elected them to do. And if Doge can shine a light on that, God, I mean, look at the people who are trying right now to get our country back on solid ground. And that's what I firmly believe. I disagree with a lot of their politics. Vance, Trump, Elon, Hesteg, all of these people. All those, even Tulsi, right? I disagree with them on things. But what I see right now is that they're making an effort for America. What we saw over the last 4 years out of Biden in his camp was placating the extreme left, which is a much smaller number than America. So we'll touch on Ukraine right here. Babylon B. Embarrassed Trump realizes he had Russia and Ukraine confused this entire time. I don't know what his tactics are over there. I get that Zelensky has pissed him off, but he hasn't stopped aid going to the Ukraine. Here's another one from Babylon B. Trump signals U.S. ready to forgive Ukraine for invading Russia. It's funny. Something needs to be done over there. There needs to be concessions. One of the things that I'm hearing right now, I guess that's really upsetting Trump, is that we want a deal with Ukraine for our companies to go in and mine rare earth minerals. I guess that's part of the animosity between these two guys. But it is time to end that war. This is stupid. I mean, yes, Ukraine's going to have to give up land. Russia will win this round. But as disgusting as that sounds, it's the only outcome. So, yeah, I thought we were getting better. And then I heard an article on Armstrong and Getty about some left-wing nutbag reminding us that the yellow thumbs up emoji is still racist. I'm glad it pops up every now and then because it's humorous, but let's hope that we've reversed course on that dumbass way of thinking. And I covered it last week, but Moss Landing, the Vistra battery fire, it started up again. This is its fifth fire since 2021. So for the people who aren't math inclined, that's 5 fires in 4 years. I'm beginning to think that batteries are not a good idea. Go nuclear. I'm a strong proponent of nuclear. And the last time the United States had a problem with nuclear was 3 Mile Island. That's still up and running. And Microsoft, just keep in mind, I covered this some time ago, but Microsoft has a data center back east that is going to run off of one nuclear power plant. It's going to be dedicated to running that data center. That's how much electricity we're going to need. Our electricity needs are going to skyrocket with AI and these big data farms that they need to have, data centers that they need to have. Solar and batteries are not the answer. I don't think that this is a problem that can be solved. I included this one from the Babylon Bee just because, I wanted to end with something funny. It's a scientist in a lab. Healthy vegan food carefully constructed in laboratory using 957 chemicals. That's what I've never got. I don't understand that. This whole idea that you need to have like vegan burgers, vegan nachos, vegan hot dogs, all of this vegan shit. And it's now being constructed with just chemicals. And they use a shit ton of sugars and salts to try to like make this shit taste good. Like, if that's your choice, great, whatever. I don't get it. Man is an omnivore. We need meat as much as we need vegetables. You know, we could all probably use some more vegetables in our diet. Well, I guess this is the part where I start winding it down. 5 years ago, Trump was president and COVID was upon us, but everything seemed okay. We had that crazy election and, things started to spiral. But before that, I was growing frustrated by the media and politicians telling people how to think and vote. It was like common sense had left America. Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump? The only thing I saw in that was that red and blue were losing their way. That this was just cuckoo bananas time. But what really got me was the long-standing mantras. Like, if you value the Second Amendment, you have to vote Republican. If you're into gay rights, you have to vote Democrat. If you're pro-life, you have to vote Republican. If you want a pro-choice, you have to vote Democrats. If you want secure borders, you have to vote Republican. Blah, blah, blah. You know all the mantras out there. If you smoke weed, you got to vote Democrat. And I started to think that, like, where do I fit in? And what I saw in my day-to-day job was the opposite of these narratives. I saw Mexicans supporting border control. I saw Republicans smoking weed. I saw gay people who supported the Second Amendment. I started to realize that America is not red or blue, and that while the Republicans have answers and the Democrats had answers, they both focused on the wrong things. A lot of times, unfortunately, they focused on the extremes or the far side of their ideology. So red and blue merging into purple became my logic. I strapped on this costume because I wanted the world to know that you could still be an oddball, a freak, and still support conservative approaches, but still retain some of your progressive views. In the early days, I summed it up all the time. You can have gay rights and gun rights. You can do that. My mission became the death of one or both parties. And competition breeds excellence. And only having two parties seemed very illogical. And it still seems very illogical. The path forward for me was to start presenting both sides of issues, to call for common sense, and to remind people that politicians work for us and we're the bosses. And we need to seize control of D.C. or the state government. Living here in California, boy, it'd be nice if we had a little bit of mixture of ideas, not just a super majority of Democrats and all their shitty ideas. So for 5 years, I've tried to open people's eyes and hearts, But as my advisor, my daughter, kept saying, no one goes to YouTube for videos about politics. And she urged me to do a podcast. And I realized, if I was to do a podcast, it would save me the hours that editing videos require. Maybe I could focus more on writing. And, I'm starting to think about making a movement, to accomplish something. Doing these videos, it takes a lot of my Saturday and my Sunday. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it's a simple kind of like the economy of numbers, I guess, on this. I don't have enough hours to do everything. So, hopefully doing a podcast is going to allow me to do other things. So recently I've been posting both the video and the podcast, and the numbers don't lie. I reach more people through a podcast and reels on Instagram than I do on YouTube. I'm not going to entirely stop doing YouTube. There'll be little shorts and things posted here. I'll continue to post my podcast here. So if you follow me on YouTube, you're going to get notifications of the podcast, and I hope you do. I hope my message gets through, and maybe, people start, spreading the word. I don't presume to have all the answers. I just want to open people's minds to the idea of a party that balances the good ideas of both parties. A viable third party. I can't make threes with my hands. I got to go like that. Because without, like we said earlier, without the competition, our government stagnates. Our government gets into a rut. You'd see that the same thing with a restaurant. Why do restaurants work to improve and add things to their menu? To survive competition. Our government needs that competition. It can't just be red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, over and over again. We've seen the results. Look where we are right now. We have all kinds of corruption and waste and wasting time and money on bad ideas. I hope my viewers here will follow me to the podcast. I'm going to tinker with the formula a bit, maybe make it a little less political. I love America and I love my people. And I care and I want to bring more. I want to put more of myself out there and hopefully change some lives. Those are high ideals. I'm going to try to live up to them. But for now, it's goodbye to long videos and a hello to a new day. I am and always will be Kid Copious. Forever, Purple State. So are you. Love one another. Come listen to me on the podcast. And whatever you do, always remember, when it gets really bad, dance it out. Bye, y'all. Love ya.